"You're just dead weight around here," my son shouted at me across the kitchen table. "Now that Dad's gone, I'm selling his company. You're on your own." I just smiled and said, "All right, good luck." What happened next would teach him exactly who he was messing with. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Michael had been planning this little speech since David's cancer diagnosis 6 months ago. I could see it in his eyes during the funeral, not grief, but greed. His wife, Jessica, kept whispering in his ear, both of them calculating dollar signs while the pastor talked about David's 40-year legacy. "Mom, let's be realistic," Michael continued, puffing out his chest like some corporate executive. "You helped Dad with paperwork, sure, but the real business decisions were always his. Now someone needs to step up. Someone." As if I hadn't been David's equal partner in building Henderson Construction from our garage into a $3 million operation. "I already have 3 buyers lined up," Jessica chimed in, scrolling through her phone. "The market's hot. We could close within a month and split the proceeds." Split the proceeds. How generous of them to include me in the division of my own life's work. "And honestly, Mom," Michael said, leaning back in David's chair, "it's time you learned some independence. Dad protected you from business realities for too long." Protected me? I'd been managing our books, handling customer complaints, and making financial decisions for 20 years. But David and I had agreed early on to let people think he was the sole decision maker. Clients in the 1980s construction industry preferred dealing with men, and we'd learned to work within that limitation. "You're probably right, sweetheart," I said softly, playing the role I'd perfected over decades. "Business has always been over my head." Michael's face lit up with victory. "Exactly. This is really for everyone's good. You'll get your share, of course." "How generous. What would my share be?" "Well, since you were never officially involved in operations, we think a third would be fair. Still enough to live comfortably." "A third of the company I'd co-founded and co-managed for 2 decades. "That sounds very reasonable," I murmured. "Great. I'll contact the lawyers Monday. We're celebrating in Paris next week. First class, naturally. Dad would have wanted us to honor his memory properly. First class to Paris. On money from a company sale that would never happen. When do you leave?" "Tuesday morning. Trip's already booked." He kissed my forehead condescendingly. "Don't worry about anything while we're gone. Just start thinking about downsizing." After they left, I sat in my kitchen and allowed myself one moment of genuine laughter. If only they knew what David and I had set up 2 years ago when his cancer prognosis became clear. Henderson Construction had never been solely in David's name. We'd structured it as a marital partnership with automatic survivorship rights. Every major asset, every business account, every piece of equipment was jointly owned. Michael couldn't sell what belonged equally to me. But more than that, David had spent his final months quietly documenting Michael's complete lack of involvement in the business. Bank records showing Michael had drawn salary for consulting while contributing nothing. Email chains proving he'd ignored every attempt to involve him in operations. Testimony from employees about his attitude and absence. I pulled out my phone and called our lawyer. "Robert? It's Linda. Yes, I think it's time to activate David's plan. Michael just informed me he's selling our company. No, he has no idea about the documentation. Tuesday should be very educational for him. The papers were already filed. The evidence was already compiled. Michael's attempted sale would trigger a fraud investigation that would expose him as someone trying to sell assets he had no legal right to control. But for now, I'd let him enjoy his victory dance. After all, the higher they fly, the harder they fall. And Michael was about to discover that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of his entitled little life. Monday evening, Michael called from the airport, practically giddy with anticipation. "Mom, you should see this first-class lounge, real champagne, caviar service. This is how successful people live." "I'm sure it's lovely, dear. Jessica's already posted a dozen photos. Her friends are so jealous." In the background, I could hear her talking about finally getting the lifestyle we deserve. "The lawyers are meeting with the first buyer tomorrow while we're in Paris," Michael continued. "By the time we get back Friday, we should have a signed letter of intent. Tomorrow, when those lawyers would discover that Michael had no authority to sell anything. Have a wonderful trip, sweetheart. Thanks, And Mom, don't second-guess this decision. Dad's gone, and it's time to move forward. Move forward, right over my supposedly helpless body. After hanging up, I poured David's good wine and settled into his favorite chair. Tomorrow morning would bring the first wave of Michael's education. I'd spent the weekend making final preparations, confirmed my co-ownership documentation with the bank, alerted our major clients about potential disruption attempts, and briefed our foreman Carlos about the situation. "Mrs. Henderson," Carlos had said, shaking his grizzled head, "I've been expecting this since Mr. David got sick. Michael never understood what you two built here. He's about to get a crash course." My phone rang at 5:47 a.m. Pacific time. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 6 minutes later. By 8 a.m., Michael had called 11 times. I finally answered. "Good morning, sweetheart. You're up early for a vacation." "Mom," his voice was tight with panic, "there's a problem with the sale." "Oh? What kind of problem?" "The lawyers are saying I don't have sole authority to sell the company. They're asking about something called joint marital ownership and co-signatory requirements." In the background, Jessica's voice was rising steadily. Something about incompetent legal advice and wasted money. That does sound complicated. Complicated? "The buyers think we're running some kind of scam. They're threatening to report us for attempted fraud." "Goodness, why would they think that?" "Because apparently I can't prove I own what I'm trying to sell." His voice cracked. "Mom, the lawyers are saying you have equal ownership rights to everything." "How is that possible?" "Well, sweetheart, I was married to your father for 42 years. In Ohio, that creates certain automatic property rights. But you never worked in the business." "Actually, I worked in the business every day for 20 years. I just let people think your father was making all the decisions because it was better for client relationships." Dead silence. Then a sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan. "Are you saying you actually own half the company?" "I own half of everything your father and I built together." "Yes. But that's impossible. Dad was the construction expert. You just did paperwork." "Michael, who do you think taught your father accounting? Who negotiated our first major contracts? Who handled all the banking relationships while he focused on job sites?" Another long silence as reality began penetrating his entitled worldview. "This can't be legal. I'll contest it." "You could try. But 20 years of joint tax returns, shared business accounts, and documented partnership decisions might be difficult to overcome." "Mom, please. We've already spent money on this trip. The hotel, the restaurants, everything was supposed to be covered by the sale proceeds." "That sounds like poor financial planning." "Poor planning. We were celebrating what we thought was our inheritance." "Your inheritance? How interesting. I wasn't aware that I had died." The sound he made was pure anguish. "What do you want? Money? A bigger share? Just tell me what it'll take. I want you to come home and have a conversation about respect, responsibility, and what your father actually intended for this company. And then you'll approve the sale? We'll discuss it. We're stuck here until Friday. Our return flights aren't until then. Then you have 4 days to think about how you want to approach our conversation." After hanging up, I called Carlos. "How did the crew take the news about Michael's attempted sale?" "About like you'd expect. Tommy said if that boy sells this company, he'll quit before the ink dries." "Well, Tommy can stop worrying. Michael just discovered that selling requires the agreement of both owners." "And the other owner has opinions?" "The other owner has very strong opinions about protecting what she and her husband built together." Wednesday brought 17 calls. I answered the 10th one. "Where have you been?" Michael screamed. "I've been calling for hours." "I've been working, dear. Someone has to run the company while you're on vacation." "Run the company? You can't just take over." "I'm not taking over anything. I'm exercising my rights as co-owner and surviving spouse." "This is insane." "You're stealing my inheritance." "Your inheritance?" "Michael, your father left you something very specific in his will. Would you like to know what it was?" "Yes." I pulled out the document David had written during his final weeks. Not the simplified version I'd mentioned before, but his actual last wishes. "To my son, Michael, I leave you the opportunity to earn your place in this family business through honest work, respect for others, and demonstrated competence. The choice of what to do with this opportunity is yours alone." Silence. "That's it? An opportunity? Your father believed that anything worth having should be earned, not inherited. But I'm his son. Yes, and I was his wife and business partner. He trusted me to decide whether you've earned the right to inherit what we built. This is blackmail. This is a test. Your father designed it specifically for this situation. What situation? The situation where you'd try to sell his life's work for quick cash while treating me like I was worthless. In the background, Jessica was having what sounded like a complete meltdown. I caught words like bankruptcy and my parents and how embarrassing. Mom, we're desperate here. Our credit cards are maxed out. The hotel is demanding payment. Have you considered getting jobs? Jobs? We're in Paris. We don't speak French. Sounds like you should have planned better. Please. I know I said some things I shouldn't have. I was upset about Dad dying. I wasn't thinking clearly. Actually, you were thinking very clearly. You were thinking about money, specifically how to get it without earning it. What do you want me to do? I want you to come home and prove you're capable of the maturity and work ethic your father hoped to see in you. And if I do that, then we'll discuss your future role in the family business. Will you help us get home? I considered this. Part of me wanted to leave them stranded as a lesson, but David would have wanted me to show mercy alongside justice. I'll arrange transportation, economy class. You'll work off the cost when you get back. Thank you. God, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Michael. The hard part is just beginning. Friday evening, I picked up my son and daughter-in-law from the airport. They looked like refugees from a disaster zone. Rumpled clothes, exhausted faces, and the hunched shoulders of people who'd learned that the world doesn't revolve around them. Hi, Mom, Michael said quietly. Hello, sweetheart. We drove home in silence. Not the comfortable quiet of people who understood each other, but the awkward tension of family members trying to figure out where they stood. Your old room is available, I told Michael as we pulled into the driveway. Rent is $500 a month. Rent? Jessica sputtered. He's your son. He's a 35-year-old man who needs to learn financial responsibility. Michael looked at Jessica, then back at me. That's fair. When is it due? 1st of the month. And Michael? You start work Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. Work where? Henderson Construction. You wanted to understand the business? Time to learn it from the ground up. What about me? Jessica demanded. What about you? Where am I supposed to work? That's entirely up to you. But if you're staying in my house, you'll contribute to household expenses. Jessica's face went through several interesting color changes. This is ridiculous. We shouldn't have to live like common laborers. Then don't, I said simply. You're free to leave any time. She stormed upstairs without another word. Michael lingered in the kitchen, looking around like he was seeing it for the first time. Mom? Yes? I'm sorry. For what I said about you being dead weight. For trying to sell the company. For everything. Apologies are a start, sweetheart, but your father and I always believed that actions matter more than words. What kind of actions? The kind that prove you've learned what it means to earn something instead of just expecting it. That night, for the first time since David's death, I felt like his plan might actually work. Our son was finally ready to discover who he could become when entitlement was replaced with effort. Monday morning arrived like a cold slap of reality. I found Michael in the kitchen at 6:30 a.m., dressed in actual work clothes and looking nervous. Ready for your first day? I asked. I think so. What exactly will I be doing? Whatever Carlos tells you to do. He's the foreman. You're the newest employee. Will he go easy on me because I'm the owner's son? You're not the owner's son at work. You're just Michael, a guy who needs to prove he can handle basic construction tasks. We drove to the Henderson construction yard in my truck. Carlos was waiting with a clipboard and a skeptical expression. This him? He asked, looking Michael up and down. This is Michael. He's here to learn the business from the bottom up. Any special treatment? None whatsoever. He succeeds or fails on his own merit. Carlos nodded. All right, boy. You ever done manual labor before? Some. Not recently. Well, you're about to get reacquainted with it. Grab those 2x4s and help Tommy load the truck. I watched Michael spend his first morning hauling lumber and learning that construction work was nothing like he'd imagined. By lunch break, he was sweating through his shirt and moving like every muscle hurt. How's it going? I asked when I checked on the crew. Hard, he admitted, but not impossible. The physical work gets easier. The mental part, learning to work as part of a team, following instructions, paying attention to details, that takes longer. How long did it take Dad? Your father spent 5 years working for other contractors before he started his own company. He said those 5 years taught him more about business than any college degree could have. That afternoon, Michael made his first real mistake. He misunderstood Carlos's instructions and cut a piece of expensive trim wood 2 inches too short. "Damn it, boy," Carlos exploded. "That's $40 of material wasted because you weren't paying attention." I watched from across the job site as Michael's face reddened with embarrassment and anger. For a moment, I thought he might storm off or make excuses. Instead, he took a deep breath. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'll pay for the replacement material out of my wages." Carlos studied him for a long moment. Mistakes happen, but they happen less when you listen more and assume less. "Yes, sir." That evening, Michael came home exhausted and discouraged. "I don't know if I can do this," he told me over dinner. "Everything is harder than it looks, and I feel like I'm constantly screwing up." Your father felt the same way his first month. Really? He came home every night covered in sawdust and convinced he'd chosen the wrong career. But he stuck with it because he understood that anything worth doing is difficult at first. What kept him going? The satisfaction of building something with his hands, the respect of co-workers who saw him improve every day, and the knowledge that he was learning skills that would serve him for life. Do you think I can learn those same skills? I think you can learn anything you're willing to work for. 3 weeks into his construction education, Michael had stopped complaining about sore muscles and started asking intelligent questions about building techniques. Carlos began giving him slightly more complex tasks, measuring, marking cuts, even some basic electrical work under supervision. "He's improving," Carlos told me privately. "Not fast, but steady. And he listens to feedback instead of arguing. That's progress. The other guys are starting to accept him too. He doesn't act superior anymore." Meanwhile, Jessica was struggling with the reality of needing actual employment. She'd applied for several retail positions, but kept getting turned down. Apparently, a 3-year gap in employment while supporting my husband's career development didn't impress potential employers. "This is humiliating," she complained one evening. "I have a college degree." "So do lots of people who work retail," Michael replied. "There's nothing shameful about honest work." "Don't lecture me about honest work. You're doing construction because your mother is forcing you to." "No, I'm doing construction because I never bothered to learn any actual skills. Mom's giving me the chance to develop some." This was a new perspective from Michael, viewing his situation as an opportunity rather than a punishment. "Fine," Jessica snapped, "but I'm not going to pretend I'm happy about living like this." That weekend, I found Michael in David's study, reading construction manuals and building codes. Homework? Research. I want to understand the technical side better. Carlos says I need to learn the why behind the instructions, not just the what. Your father spent hours in here studying when he was building the business. I'm starting to understand why. There's so much more to construction than just hammering nails. Looking at him bent over the same books David had studied 30 years earlier, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the funeral. Genuine hope for our son's future. Maybe Michael was finally ready to become the man his father had always believed he could be. 2 months into Michael's construction apprenticeship, Jessica made her decision. "I can't do this anymore," she announced over breakfast. "I'm filing for divorce." Michael looked up from his coffee, and I was surprised to see something like relief in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "I didn't sign up to be married to a construction worker living in his mother's house," she said coldly. "This isn't the life I planned." "What life did you plan?" "The life your father promised us. Money, status, respect in the community. Not this poverty. We're not poor, Jessica. We're just not rich." "Same thing." "No, it's not. Poor means you can't afford necessities. We can afford everything we need. We just can't afford everything we want." This distinction between needs and wants was something the old Michael had never understood. "I'm moving back with my parents," Jessica continued. "My lawyer will be in touch about property division." "What property? We don't own anything." "Exactly my point." After she left, Michael sat quietly for several minutes. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, actually, I am. I kept thinking I should fight to save the marriage, but honestly, I don't think there was anything real to save." "What do you mean?" Jessica fell in love with what she thought I was going to become, not who I actually was. And I fell in love with how she made me look to other people, not who she really was. This level of self-awareness was completely new for Michael. Do you regret the marriage? I regret that we both wasted 3 years pretending to be people we weren't. But I don't regret learning that I want something different now. What do you want? I want to build something real. A life based on actual accomplishments, not just inherited advantages. That afternoon at the job site, Carlos called Michael over. I've been watching you for 2 months, he said. You ready for more responsibility? What kind of responsibility? Customer interaction. Mrs. Patterson needs a small deck added to her house. Simple job, good client. I want you to handle the estimate and manage the project. This was a significant step up, from manual labor to customer service and project management. You think I'm ready? I think you've earned the chance to find out. Michael spent 3 hours at Mrs. Patterson's house, measuring her space, discussing her needs, and explaining options within her budget. When he came back, he had a signed contract and a detailed project plan. How did it go? I asked. Better than I expected. Mrs. Patterson reminded me of you, actually. Someone who deserved to be treated with respect, not talked down to. What did you promise her? A simple deck design that fits her space and budget, completed in 2 weeks with minimal disruption to her routine. Can you deliver that? I think so. Carlos says I can manage a crew of 2 guys, and I've already worked out the materials list and timeline. The Patterson project became Michael's first real test as a leader rather than just a worker. I watched him coordinate with suppliers, manage his small crew, and solve unexpected problems without panic or excuses. Your boy's got potential, one of the subcontractors told me. He listens to advice, makes decisions when needed, and isn't afraid to admit when he doesn't know something. The deck was completed on time and under budget. Mrs. Patterson was so pleased that she recommended Henderson Construction to 3 of her neighbors. How does it feel? I asked Michael that evening. Like I finally understand what Dad meant about building something that matters. How so? Mrs. Patterson told me the deck will let her have coffee outside for the first time in years. She seemed genuinely happy. I've never had a job before where I could see how my work actually improved someone's life. Your father always said the best part of construction was making people's dreams come true. I used to think that was just marketing talk. Now I get it. 3 months later, Michael had managed 6 successful projects and earned the respect of both customers and co-workers. Carlos began talking about promoting him to assistant foreman. He's ready for bigger challenges, Carlos told me. Not because he's your son, but because he's earned it. What kind of challenges? Managing multiple projects. Training new workers, maybe even handling some of the business development. You think he can handle business development? I think he understands what this company stands for now. Quality work, fair prices, treating people right. Those are the only qualifications that matter. That evening, I found Michael in David's study again. But this time, he wasn't just reading manuals. He was sketching project designs and writing detailed cost estimates. New project? I asked. Ideas for expanding our residential renovation services. I've been talking to customers about what they need, and there's a real market for smaller projects that bigger contractors ignore. I looked at his sketches. Professional, detailed, clearly thought through. This is impressive work. I've been thinking about what Dad would do if he were still here, how he'd grow the business while staying true to his values. And what do you think he'd do? Focus on helping people, rather than just making money. The money follows naturally when you do good work for fair prices. For the first time since David's death, I began to seriously consider what would happen to Henderson Construction in the long term. Michael was finally becoming someone worthy of inheriting his father's legacy, but earning it and keeping it were 2 different challenges entirely. 6 months after Paris, Michael had transformed from liability to asset. Carlos officially promoted him to assistant foreman, and our client satisfaction scores reached an all-time high. More importantly, the crew had stopped thinking of him as the boss's son and started treating him as a colleague who'd earned his place. I want to show you something, Michael said one evening, spreading papers across the kitchen table. What's this? A business proposal. I've been researching expansion opportunities that align with Dad's original vision. The documents were professionally prepared. Market analysis, financial projections, implementation timelines. This wasn't amateur hour anymore. Specifically, I want to create a dedicated home renovation division. Small projects, elderly clients, people who need reliable contractors for accessibility modifications. Why that market? Because it's underserved, profitable, and helps people who really need us. Plus, it builds community relationships that lead to referrals. I studied his numbers. Conservative but achievable, with built-in safeguards and realistic timelines. What would you need to make this work? Initial investment of $30,000 for tools and materials, permission to hire 2 skilled workers, and authority to operate semi-independently while proving the concept. Authority from who? From you. You own the company. I looked at this man who 6 months ago had wanted to sell Henderson Construction to strangers for quick cash, who now wanted to help it grow in ways that honored David's values. Michael, what do you see as your future with this company? I'd like to think I could eventually run it the way Dad intended. But I understand. I need to earn that opportunity. How would you earn it? By proving I can manage people, grow the business responsibly, and maintain the standards Dad established. And if you fail, then I keep learning until I succeed, or accept that I'm not management material and find another way to contribute. This humility, the willingness to admit limitations and accept consequences, was completely foreign to the old Michael. I'm approving your proposal, I said. $30,000 budget, 3-month trial period. But Michael, this isn't just about money or expansion. This is about proving you understand what your father built here. I understand. Do you? Because if you succeed, it opens the door to bigger opportunities. If you fail, it proves you're not ready for leadership responsibility. I won't fail. How can you be sure? Because I'm not doing this for me anymore. I'm doing it for the people we help, for the employees who depend on us, and for Dad's memory. Michael's renovation division launched with a project that perfectly embodied our values, installing grab bars and ramps for an elderly veteran who'd been struggling with mobility issues. Mr. Rodriguez saved for 2 years to afford these modifications, Michael told me after the consultation. He was worried about being overcharged because he'd heard horror stories about contractors taking advantage of seniors. What did you tell him? That Henderson Construction's reputation is built on treating every customer like family. The Rodriguez project was completed flawlessly. Michael's crew worked around the family's schedule, cleaned up meticulously each day, and charged exactly what they'd quoted. No surprise fees or change orders. Your son is a godsend, Mrs. Rodriguez told me when I stopped by for the final inspection. He explained everything clearly, showed up when promised, and treated my husband with such respect. Word spread quickly through the senior community. Within 6 weeks, Michael's renovation team was booked solid with accessibility modifications, bathroom updates, and small home repairs. We need to hire more people, Michael told me after his 2nd month. I'm getting calls every day. What kind of people? Skilled workers who share our values. People who understand that customer service is just as important as technical competence. Michael's hiring choices showed remarkable judgment. Instead of poaching experienced workers from competitors, he focused on training promising candidates who were hungry to learn. This is Tony Martinez. He introduced a young man who couldn't have been older than 25. He's been doing handyman work, but wants to learn proper construction techniques. Good attitude, reliable, great with customers. And this is Helen Chang, he continued, gesturing to a woman in her 40s. She's switching careers from office work to construction. Fresh perspective, excellent organizational skills, really cares about doing quality work. Why these people specifically? Because they want to be here for the right reasons. They're not just looking for a paycheck. They want to build something meaningful. Watching Michael work with his team, I saw David's leadership style reflected in unexpected ways. The patience with new workers, the attention to customer needs, the insistence that every job reflect well on the Henderson name. You're becoming quite the manager, I told him one afternoon. I'm learning that leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about helping people do their best work. Where did you learn that? From watching you run the main operation. From remembering how Dad treated people, even when I was too selfish to appreciate it. By his 6th month running the renovation division, Michael had built something impressive, a profitable business unit that employed 7 people and had a 2-month waiting list. More importantly, he'd built a reputation that enhanced rather than traded on the Henderson name. One evening, I found him on the phone with a customer, patiently explaining why their project would take longer than expected. "I understand you're disappointed about the delay, Mrs. Johnson, but we discovered some electrical issues that need to be addressed before we can proceed safely." "Yes, it will add 3 days to the timeline." "No, there's no additional charge. This is part of our responsibility to deliver safe, code-compliant work." After he hung up, I asked, "How often do you have conversations like that?" "Couple times a week. People appreciate honesty even when it's not what they want to hear. Your father would be proud of how you handled that." I keep asking myself what Dad would do in each situation. Usually leads me to the right answer. Looking at my son, this man who'd learned to value customer relationships over quick profits, I realized David's plan had worked better than either of us had dared to hope. Michael wasn't just rebuilding his life. He was building a foundation for lasting success based on integrity rather than inheritance. 9 months after his construction apprenticeship began, Michael surprised me with an announcement that changed our family dynamic completely. "I found an apartment," he said over dinner. "Small place downtown, but it's clean and affordable on my salary. You don't have to move out, sweetheart. You're welcome here as long as you want." I know, and I'm grateful, but I need to prove to myself that I can live independently. Besides, you deserve your privacy back. This decision, moving out by choice rather than necessity, showed a level of maturity that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "When are you planning to move?" "Next month. I've saved enough for first month's rent and a security deposit." "I'm proud of you for being financially responsible. I learned it from watching you manage household expenses while I was figuring out how to be an adult." 2 weeks later, while helping Michael move his modest belongings into a studio apartment, I met his downstairs neighbor, a woman about his age who was carrying architectural drawings up the stairs. "Sorry about the noise," Michael said. "I'm just moving in." "No problem. I'm Sarah Chen, 2A. Michael Henderson, 2B. Those look like interesting plans. Renovation project for an elderly client. I'm an architect specializing in accessible design." I watched Michael's face light up with professional interest. "Really? I manage a renovation team that does a lot of accessibility work. Mind if I ask what you're planning?" They spent 20 minutes discussing ramp specifications, grab bar placement, and universal design principles. I could see genuine mutual respect developing, not attraction based on appearances, but appreciation for shared professional values. "Would you be interested in consulting on some of our projects?" Michael asked. "We always want to do better work for our clients." "I'd love to see what you're doing. Most contractors aren't interested in going beyond minimum ADA compliance." "We're not most contractors." 3 weeks later, Sarah Chen came to dinner at my invitation. I wanted to meet the woman who'd brought a new energy to Michael's conversations about work. She was nothing like Jessica. Where Jessica had been flashy and demanding, Sarah was quietly competent. Where Jessica had talked about wanting luxury, Sarah discussed helping people age safely in their homes. "Michael's renovation team is doing really impressive work," she told me over dessert. "The Garcia kitchen project was beautiful, but what struck me most was how carefully he listened to their needs and budget constraints. He's learned that good business is about solving problems, not just making sales." "Exactly. Too many contractors try to upsell unnecessarily. Michael focuses on giving people what they actually need." After dinner, they spent an hour reviewing project plans and discussing design improvements. I watched through the window as they worked together, their heads bent over drawings, both completely absorbed in problem solving. "She's wonderful," I told Michael after Sarah left. "I think so too. Mom, I've never met anyone like her." "How so?" "She challenges me professionally without being competitive about it. She cares about the same things I'm learning to care about: helping people, creating functional beauty, building community relationships." "Sounds like she's good for you." "She is. But more than that, I think we complement each other. She handles the technical design aspects I'm still learning, and I understand the practical construction challenges she doesn't always consider. Professional partnership, among other things." 6 months later, Sarah was spending most evenings at Michael's apartment, working on joint projects and clearly falling in love with both the work and the man. "We make a good team," she told me one evening as we prepared dinner while Michael finished up at a job site. "In what way?" "Michael understands people, what they need, how to communicate with them, how to manage expectations. I understand systems, how to design solutions that are both beautiful and functional. And personally, he's the kindest, most honest man I've ever known. He works harder than anyone I've met, but he never complains or takes shortcuts. He's changed dramatically from the person he was 2 years ago. He told me about Paris, about everything that happened after his father died. It sounds like hitting bottom was exactly what he needed. Why do you say that? Because it stripped away all his illusions about himself. He had to face who he really was and decide whether he liked that person. And he didn't. No, he didn't. No, So he changed. Not just his behavior, but his fundamental values. That kind of transformation doesn't happen unless someone really wants to become a better person. That Christmas, Michael proposed to Sarah in our living room. Not with an expensive ring or elaborate gesture, but with a heartfelt speech about wanting to build a life together based on shared values and mutual respect. "I can't offer you wealth or luxury," he told her in front of our small family gathering, "but I can offer you partnership, honesty, and the promise that we'll build something meaningful together." "That's all I've ever wanted," Sarah replied through happy tears. They married the following spring in a simple ceremony at our local church, with Carlos serving as Michael's best man, and me walking Sarah down the aisle at her request. "David would have loved this," I told Michael during the reception. "He would have loved her," Michael agreed. "She's everything he hoped I'd be smart enough to appreciate." "What do you mean? Someone who values substance over appearance? Who cares more about helping people than impressing them? Who understands that the best things in life are built slowly and carefully?" Sounds like you've learned what real love looks like. I've learned what real partnership looks like. Sarah and I don't just make each other happy, we make each other better. Looking around at the reception, simple decorations, homemade food, guests who genuinely cared about the couple rather than just attending for social obligation, I felt David's presence more strongly than I had since his funeral. Our son had finally learned to value the things that actually mattered, and he'd found someone who shared those values completely. 1 year after Michael and Sarah's wedding, they bought a small house 3 streets away from me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to stay close to family while building their independent life. "It needs work," Michael told me as we toured the 1950s ranch house, "but the bones are good. And Sarah has amazing ideas for maximizing the space." "What kind of work? Kitchen renovation? Bathroom update? Maybe finishing the basement for a home office? Nothing huge, but enough to make it truly ours." "Are you planning to do the work yourselves?" "Most of it. Sarah's designing everything, and I'll handle the construction with help from the crew on weekends." Watching them plan their home renovations, I saw the perfect blend of Sarah's design expertise and Michael's construction knowledge. More importantly, I saw 2 people who understood that building something together, whether a house or a marriage, required patience, compromise, and shared vision. "We want to start a family soon," Sarah told me one evening as we worked in my garden. "Michael's going to be an amazing father." "What makes you think so?" "He's patient, he listens, and he understands that people need to learn at their own pace. Plus, he's figured out how to balance high standards with genuine encouragement. Those are good qualities in a parent. He learned them from his work experience. But I think they came from watching you too." "Me?" "The way you handled his transformation. You set clear boundaries but never stopped believing he could change. That's exactly the kind of parent I want to be." Meanwhile, Michael's renovation division had grown into Henderson Construction's most profitable segment. We now employed 12 people in the accessibility and home modification specialty, with a 3-month waiting list and requests for expansion into neighboring counties. "I want to discuss something with you," Michael said one evening, spreading financial reports across my kitchen table. "What's this?" "Proof that the renovation division is ready to become its own company." The numbers were impressive. Consistent profitability, growing client base, excellent reviews, and a team of skilled workers who developed strong customer relationships. "Your own company?" "Henderson Home Modifications, LLC, a subsidiary of Henderson Construction, but operated independently with its own profit sharing and growth potential." "Why separate it?" "Because it's become big enough to need dedicated management, and because I think it could serve as a training ground for the next generation of Henderson Construction leadership." "Next generation?" Sarah and I want our children to understand the construction business, even if they choose different careers. And there are several crew members who show management potential but need opportunities to develop those skills. This long-term thinking, planning not just for immediate success, but for sustainable growth and employee development, showed how completely Michael had internalized David's business philosophy. What would you need to make this work? Authority to operate independently while maintaining Henderson quality standards, profit-sharing agreement with the parent company, and your approval to use the Henderson name. Michael, using the Henderson name isn't something I give lightly. I understand. But I think I've earned the right to build on what Dad started. I looked at this man who'd spent 3 years proving his competence, integrity, and commitment to our family values. You have earned it, but with conditions. What conditions? Quarterly reviews for the first 2 years, continued employment for all current renovation team members, and a formal succession plan that protects both companies if something happens to you. All reasonable. Anything else? Yes. I want to discuss your long-term future with Henderson Construction itself. Michael looked surprised. What do you mean? I mean, it's time we talked about ownership transition. Your father always intended for you to inherit the business, but only after proving you were worthy of it. And you think I've proven that? I think you've proven something more important, that you understand what this business really represents. I pulled out documents that Robert Morrison had prepared months earlier, partnership agreements that would gradually transfer ownership to Michael based on continued performance and character demonstration. This gives you increasing control over 5 years, with full ownership transfer when you turn 40. Michael read through the partnership terms carefully. This is more than I expected. It's what your father wanted, once you'd shown you could handle the responsibility. What if I don't meet the performance standards? Then we modify the timeline. But Michael, I'm not worried about your performance anymore. I'm worried about whether you want the responsibility. What do you mean? I mean, running Henderson Construction isn't just about managing projects and employees. It's about preserving a legacy, maintaining community relationships, and training the next generation. That's a lifetime commitment. I understand. And yes, I want that responsibility. Even knowing it means less time for your own family, more stress, more difficult decisions. Dad managed to balance family and business. I can learn to do the same. Your father had help. So do I. Sarah understands the business, supports the mission, and wants to be part of building something meaningful. Looking at my son, this man who'd learned to think beyond his own immediate interests, I felt confident that David's legacy would be in good hands. But first, Michael would need to face one more test, learning to lead during a crisis. And unfortunately, that test was coming sooner than any of us expected. 18 months into Michael's independent management of the renovation division, we faced our first major crisis, a client lawsuit that threatened both companies' reputations. The Martineau family claimed that Henderson Home Modifications had caused water damage during a bathroom renovation, resulting in $50,000 in repairs and temporary housing costs. They were demanding compensation and threatening to take their story to local media. This could destroy everything we've built, Michael told me, pacing my living room with legal documents in his hand. Tell me exactly what happened. We renovated their master bathroom 6 months ago. Last week, they discovered water damage in the walls and ceiling below. They're claiming our plumbing work caused a slow leak that's been building up. What does Tony think? Tony Martinez was Michael's most experienced plumber, the one who'd handled the Martineau project. Tony swears the plumbing was perfect when we finished. He thinks the leak started somewhere else and spread to make it look like our work failed. Can you prove that? Not without expensive testing and expert witnesses. Even then, it's our word against theirs. What are your options? Pay the $50,000 to make it go away, fight it in court and risk losing more money plus bad publicity. Or, he paused, or what? Or figure out what really happened and prove it. This was the moment that would define Michael's leadership style. Would he take the easy way out, or fight for the truth even when it was risky? What do you want to do? I want to investigate. Not to avoid paying if we actually caused the damage, but to make sure we don't take responsibility for something we didn't do. That could be expensive and time-consuming. Yes, but Dad always said reputation is the only thing you can't rebuild once it's destroyed. Michael spent the next week conducting his own investigation. He reviewed photos from the original project, interviewed each crew member separately, and even hired an independent plumber to examine the Martineau house. "I found something," he told me Friday evening, spreading photos across my kitchen table. "What?" "The leak isn't coming from our plumbing. It's coming from a shower fixture that we didn't touch, one that was installed by the previous homeowner's handyman 3 years ago." "Can you prove that?" The independent plumber confirmed it. "The fixture was installed wrong from the beginning, but it took 3 years for the leak to become obvious." "What are you going to do with this information?" "Present it to the Martineaus, offer to help them file a claim against the handyman's insurance, try to work out a solution that's fair to everyone." This approach, seeking truth and fairness rather than just legal victory, was exactly how David would have handled the situation. The meeting with the Martineau family was tense but productive. Michael presented his evidence calmly, offered to connect them with the proper insurance resources, and even volunteered to coordinate repairs at cost if they couldn't recover from the actual responsible party. "I don't understand, Mrs. Martineau said. "If you didn't cause this, why are you offering to help fix it?" "Because you're dealing with a problem that started during a project in your home, even if it wasn't directly our fault. We want to make sure you're taken care of." 2 weeks later, the handyman's insurance company accepted responsibility for the damage. The Martineaus not only dropped their lawsuit, but hired Henderson Home Modifications for additional work in their house. "How did you know they'd react that way?" I asked Michael. "I didn't, but I knew that doing the right thing was more important than protecting ourselves from unfair accusations, even if it had cost us money." Even then, Dad always said that short-term financial losses are recoverable, but reputation damage lasts forever. Your father would be proud of how you handled that crisis. I hope so. But more than that, I hope I'm setting the right example for my team. They were watching to see whether I'd throw them under the bus to protect the company. And what did they see? That I'll fight for the truth even when it's difficult, and that I'll stand behind their work when I know it's quality. The Martineau crisis became a turning point for Michael's leadership credibility. Word spread through the construction community about how he'd handled the situation, and both companies started receiving referrals specifically because of their reputation for integrity. "Funny how doing the right thing turned out to be good business," Sarah observed one evening. "Dad always said that ethical behavior and successful business weren't opposites. They were the same thing over the long term." 6 months later, Michael faced his biggest leadership test yet. Carlos announced his retirement after 30 years with Henderson Construction. "I'm getting too old for this work," Carlos told us over dinner. "Time to let younger people take over." "Who's going to replace you?" I asked. "That's up to you and Michael, but I think Tommy Rodriguez is ready for more responsibility." Tommy had worked for us for 8 years, starting as general labor and working his way up to crew leader. He was skilled, reliable, and respected by both workers and customers. "What do you think?" I asked Michael. "I think Carlos is right about Tommy, but I also think we need to restructure how we manage the main construction operation." "How so?" "Split it into 2 divisions, commercial projects and residential construction. Tommy could manage residential, and we could promote Maria Santos to handle commercial work. That's a significant organizational change. It's also an opportunity to create advancement paths for our best people while specializing our services." This kind of strategic thinking, seeing change as opportunity rather than just problem solving, showed how much Michael had grown as a business leader. The transition went smoothly. Tommy and Maria both embraced their new responsibilities, and the specialized divisions allowed us to serve clients more effectively while providing career growth for long-term employees. "Your boy's ready for the big chair," Carlos told me at his retirement party. "You think so?" "I know so. He's got your husband's vision, but he's also got something David sometimes lacked." "What's that?" "Patience with people who are still learning. David could be hard on folks who didn't pick things up quickly. Michael remembers what it felt like to be the one who didn't know anything." Looking around the party, employees, clients, and community members all celebrating Carlos's contributions, I realized that Michael had successfully navigated his most important leadership transition. He was ready to take full control of Henderson Construction. The question was whether I was ready to let him. 2.5 years after the Paris disaster, Sarah gave birth to David Andrew Henderson, named for his grandfather and carrying the weight of family expectations along with his father's hopes. I held my grandson for the first time in the same hospital where I'd said goodbye to David, and the circle of life felt complete. "He has Dad's hands," Michael said softly, touching the baby's tiny fingers. "Look at those long fingers, built for creating things." "What kind of things do you hope he'll create?" I asked. "Whatever makes him happy and helps other people, as long as he learns that anything worth having requires honest work." "You sound like your father." "I hope so. I want to be the kind of dad he was, minus the part where I spoil the kid and enable bad behavior." Watching Michael with his son over the following months, I saw all of David's patience and gentleness, but tempered with a wisdom that came from personal experience with consequences. "He's not going to grow up entitled like I did," Michael told me one evening as we watched Sarah feed the baby. "This little guy is going to understand that respect is earned, not inherited." "How will you teach him that?" "By example, by showing him what it looks like to work hard, treat people fairly, and build something meaningful." 6 months later, Michael presented me with a comprehensive business plan that took my breath away. "This is a 5-year strategy for Henderson Construction," he said, spreading professionally bound documents across my kitchen table. "Growth projections, market analysis, competitive positioning, and succession planning." The plan was sophisticated, realistic, and clearly showed Michael's complete understanding of both the technical and business aspects of our industry. "Where did you learn to prepare something this detailed?" "Night classes in business management, consultation with Sarah on the financial modeling, and a lot of advice from our accountant and lawyer." "What are your primary goals?" "Sustainable growth that maintains our quality standards, employee development programs that create advancement opportunities, and community involvement that builds long-term relationships." "Any major changes?" "I want to start a scholarship program, the David Henderson Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing construction trades education." "Tell me more about that." "Dad always said the best way to honor success was to create opportunities for other people. I want Henderson Construction to be known for developing the next generation of skilled tradespeople." "That's a beautiful way to honor his memory." "It's also good business. The construction industry has a labor shortage because young people don't see it as a career with advancement potential. We can change that perception." I studied the scholarship proposal, detailed criteria, funding structure, mentorship components. This wasn't just a charitable gesture. It was a strategic investment in our industry's future. "Michael, this entire plan shows remarkable maturity and vision." "Thank you. But more than that, it shows I understand what Dad really built here." "What did he build?" "A company that helps people while providing good jobs for skilled workers. The money was never the point. It was just the result of doing everything else right." That evening, I called Robert Morrison. "Robert, I think it's time for the final ownership transfer." "Are you sure? The original plan called for a gradual transition over 5 years." "Plans change when circumstances exceed expectations. Michael has proven everything David hoped he would." "What triggered this decision?" "He's not just maintaining what David built. He's expanding it in ways that honor David's values while adapting to modern opportunities." "And you're comfortable with full ownership transfer?" "I'm comfortable with ensuring the Henderson name is in the right hands for the next generation." 2 weeks later, we signed the papers that made Michael the sole owner of Henderson Construction. But instead of the celebration I expected, he seemed almost subdued. "How do you feel?" I asked after Robert left. "Terrified and grateful in equal measure." "Why terrified?" "Because now I'm fully responsible for preserving what Dad built and providing for all the families who depend on this company." "And grateful?" "Because you and Dad believed I could change, even when I didn't believe it myself." "What's next?" "I keep working, keep learning, keep trying to make decisions Dad would be proud of. And if you make mistakes, then I learn from them and do better next time, just like Dad taught me." That night, as I sat in David's chair looking at his picture on the mantel, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since his death. Our son had become the man we'd always hoped he could be. Henderson Construction would continue to serve our community with integrity and excellence, and David's legacy would live on through the grandson who would grow up understanding that true success comes from serving others, not just serving yourself. The boy who'd called me dead weight had become a man worthy of carrying his father's name into the future. 3 years after Paris, on the anniversary of David's death, I stood in our company's main office watching Michael address the entire Henderson Construction team. 5 years ago, my father passed away, he began, his voice steady and confident. When he died, I thought I was inheriting a construction company. What I actually inherited was a responsibility to the families we serve, to the employees who depend on us, and to the community that has supported us for 40 years. I looked around the room at faces I'd known for decades. Carlos enjoying his retirement but still attending company meetings. Tommy and Maria managing their respective divisions with quiet competence, and younger workers who saw Henderson Construction as a career path rather than just a job. Dad always said that success isn't measured by how much money you make, but by how many people you help, Michael continued. This year, we completed over 200 projects, employed 37 people full-time, and launched our scholarship program with its first recipient. The applause was genuine and warm. These people weren't just employees anymore. They were part of a family business that had grown while maintaining its values. But I want to talk about the person who made all of this possible, Michael said, turning toward me. My mother, Linda Henderson, who kept this company running when I was too immature to understand what we had built. I felt tears starting as he continued. 3 years ago, I told my mother she was dead weight. I tried to sell the business she'd helped build and throw her out of her own home. I thought I was entitled to inherit what I'd never earned. The room was completely quiet now. Instead of giving up on me, she gave me something more valuable than money, the opportunity to become the person my father always hoped I could be. He pulled out a document that I recognized immediately. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Linda Henderson Community Foundation, funded by Henderson Construction profits and dedicated to supporting local families in need of home accessibility modifications. I started crying openly now, not from sadness, but from overwhelming pride in the man my son had become. Mom, would you come up here, please? I walked to the front of the room where Michael handed me the foundation documents. The first project will be renovating the Veterans Center accessibility features at no cost to the organization, he announced. Because Dad always said the best way to honor success is to help people who served others. The applause was thunderous. Through my tears, I could see David's picture on the wall behind Michael, and I swear I felt my husband's presence more strongly than any time since his funeral. After the meeting, as people gathered for cake and coffee, Sarah approached me with baby David in her arms. He's going to be an amazing role model for his son, she said softly. Your husband? Your son. Little David is going to grow up watching a father who understands that leadership means service, that success means helping others, and that family means everything. That evening, 3 generations of Hendersons sat in my living room, the same room where Michael had called me dead weight and threatened to sell everything we'd built. Do you think Dad would be proud? Michael asked, bouncing his son gently on his knee. Your father would be amazed, I told him honestly. When he died, he hoped you might eventually learn to run the business competently. He never imagined you'd expand it into something that serves the entire community. I had good teachers. You had good examples. But you chose to follow them. I almost didn't. If you hadn't forced me to hit bottom in Paris, you would have found another way to learn the same lessons. Maybe not as quickly or dramatically, but eventually. How can you be sure? Because underneath all that entitlement and selfishness was your father's heart. It just took some difficult circumstances to bring it to the surface. As Michael and Sarah gathered their things to head home, my son lingered for a moment. Mom, I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm grateful for Paris, for losing everything, for having to start over. Why? Because if you'd just handed me the company when Dad died, I would have destroyed it through incompetence or greed. Instead, I got the chance to earn it through character and hard work. Your father always said that the best inheritances aren't money, they're values. He was right. And the values you and Dad taught me are worth more than any amount of money. Even when those lessons involved letting you struggle, especially then. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail until I learned to succeed. After they left, I sat in David's chair and looked around our living room. The same kitchen table where Michael had announced his plans to sell everything. The same mantle where David's picture still watched over our family. The same house where our son had learned that home isn't just where you live. It's where people love you enough to help you become your best self. When Michael called me dead weight and told me I was on my own, he thought he was taking everything away from me. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift imaginable. the opportunity to help him discover who he really was underneath all that selfishness and entitlement. The company was stronger than ever. Our family was closer than we'd been in decades. And David's legacy would continue through a grandson who would grow up understanding that privilege comes with responsibility, that success requires service, and that the most valuable things in life can't be inherited. They have to be earned. I wasn't dead weight after all. I was the foundation that held everything together while the people I loved learned to build their own strength. And that, I realized, was the most important inheritance of all. The rest, as they say, is family history. But it's not just our history anymore. It's the history of everyone whose life has been touched by understanding that real love sometimes requires tough lessons, that second chances have to be earned, and that the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. The best revenge is helping them become someone who would never hurt you again. David would have been proud of all of us. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.